Liam, thanks so much for coming on.
Of course.
I mean, I know it's a super far walk from where you're living now. So Liam's still living just a block away from campus.
3-minute walk.
But yeah, so I guess to kind of catch things up, so you graduated in May of last year.
Correct.
And I guess let's start with like what's the story? So like you came into my class and you got the internship, and then like what's happened so far?
Yeah, I mean, never really had any experience with analytics until junior year, I think it was. In your first class, I just got pitched to me the business analytics minor.
Mhm.
Sounded interesting, but I didn't really have any knowledge about it. And those first couple classes we had with the Power BI and Tableau and those kind of things, I really started enjoying it, and the big project that we did. But then
So can I pause you? What did you enjoy about like working with Power BI? Was it
it
the
was just
project, or was it the tool, or was it that it's like
it was both.
okay,
Yeah. I had never touched Power BI or Tableau before that. So just I like learning. So learning the tool, kind of learning how it works, but then also there's some data manipulation that we had to do. So that was interesting as well. So just being able to kind of see the data, like we manipulated it in Excel and then we transferred it to Power BI, and then we could kind of build visuals out of just numbers and columns.
right? It's almost like a much more three-dimensional version of Excel.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
don't, are you using in your current role Excel much?
Yes.
So like, well, first of all, it's kind of crazy like how much more you learn on the job than in class.
It is.
Like, so you're just in Excel, you have a tight deadline, the use case, like,
Yeah, and that's what the majority of my internship was just Excel. I had a couple classes where we it was Excel, and you get graded, but if you clicked in the wrong square in the wrong sequence, you're gonna get points taken off. And I don't really know if that's the best way to learn Excel.
yeah,
So through that class, I didn't really learn Excel, but then kind of once I was given tasks in my internship, like figure this out. There's really like no set deadline or anything like that. Just figure it out. And there's multiple ways. There's not one correct way. There's two,
right.
three different ways. So I think that's what really helped, is just being able to be free and creative. And if you mess up, you can go back in and fix it. But just being able to kind of critically think through, okay, what do I need to do? What's the problem? And how can I solve the problem?
Right. And I think what I kind of did subversively was kind of introduce you to like uncertainty.
Yep.
Like you have to make assumptions,
Yeah.
and it's not going to be perfect
Yep.
all of the time because, like for example, one thing that I do is I build out forecasts, and it's a 9-figure business, and think about all the things that impact that. So like the hurricane that came through,
Right.
like when's the last time that we had a hurricane impact North Carolina? It completely knocked out our Asheville store.
Did it
So
really?
like, yeah, so like creating a forecast that included Asheville sales, all of a sudden that's wrong.
Yep.
But it's like you're good enough that it's within the ballpark to make a decision.
Right.
But okay, so you found out about the analytics class junior year, then so first semester of senior year you came into case studies and business analytics,
Correct.
then kind of got the bug. That's when you found. How did you find your internship?
A recruiter came to Greensboro College at
Okay.
lunch one day.
So that's so cool because I don't think you would have even gone probably to that event if you hadn't even been introduced to analytics and like had that interest sparked.
Definitely not. And it was like, I mean, I had just heard about it in the class. Like they were going to be there at lunch. I had just heard about it in the class before. I was in like slides with no socks on and ball cap with a bunch of clothes that didn't match. I was like, I'll just stop by and see what happens.
Yeah, and it sounds like you really hit it off with the recruiter.
We did, yeah. We had a really good conversation. We were able to sit down. They were getting ready to leave. My class ran a little bit late, and I was kind of catching them as they were wrapping up. but we sat down, had a brief conversation at a table, and got her contact information, and just went forward from there.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, because I remember we met over a cup of coffee, and I helped you prep for like the actual. I I guess that wasn't the phone screening. That was like the behavioral portion of it.
It was a two-part interview. I wouldn't say they were really. I don't think any of them were really what people typically define as a tactical interview, but it was kind of just a brief Zoom meeting with the recruiter that came to Cogent, and that's kind of like just feeling my personality out, see if I would be a good fit for the company, getting to know me, a little bit of my backstory,
Hmm.
and then my second interview, which we had that cup of coffee and prepped for, that was a little bit more on the technical side. It was the guy I would be working for, and kind of just a breakdown of what they do. A brief story about kind of their day-to-day tasks, and kind of the vision of where I could come in and support them a little bit.
That's kind of incredible thinking about the timeline of that. So, how long had you been learning about analytics before you had that interview?
Mm. It wasn't a full year. It was
Uh,
probably 6 months.
okay, so was it mainly the Excel stuff that they were kind of talking about, or was it also like the Power BI and the Tableau stuff that you were working on?
Excel.
Okay, that's that's interesting because it seems like it's a lot lower of a bar than I would have expected.
Well,
But it is an internship, though.
it's an internship,
Yeah.
and the position that I was interviewing for, or the guy that I was working for at my internship, their role is kind of more on the business side, like processes and those kind of things, and they use Excel to support them. So it's not necessarily like their role is Excel. It's just
Right.
a tool that
But I
can.
mean, that's kind of the main like felt like lever they use to get their job done.
Correct.
Like you need to kind of understand the business use case and the decisions and like what metrics of influence what decision you make.
Right.
But yeah, from the technical standpoint, um,
That
it's
the
Excel.
Yeah, the ideas and the processes that they're putting into place, it needs to be visualized for the client so that the clients can see it and get a full understanding of it.
Gotcha. Okay, so quick question: if let's say that someone who is a sophomore or junior in college is listening to this right now, and they're interested in getting a similar, what was the specific name of your internship? Was it just marketing analyst?
No, it was just a general data analyst internship.
Okay.
Yep.
So if someone was wanting to get a similar job or internship that you got,
Mhm.
what are the key things that they would need to know from Excel?
That's a good question. The
And
big
I know the
Yeah,
conversation was like a year ago
yeah.
at this point, but like I'm kind of curious.
I would say the biggest thing is kind of the willingness to learn. That's really
Okay.
big. Because Excel, there's always something. Even now,
Right.
there's stuff I still need to learn. I can always be better in something. So that's the big thing. But it really helps to have a basic understanding, like the formulas, like X lookup, V lookup, those kind of things, and when to use the right formulas in the right scenario. So just doesn't have to be super in depth, but I would say just enough to where if you're given a couple of different tasks, you at least have an idea or a
Enough to
starting
be
point.
dangerous, so to speak.
Right, enough to be
Yeah.
dangerous.
Um, okay. That's interesting. So you said that you were building out visuals. Were you doing that with like pivot charts, or were you doing that just out of like the chart functionality within Excel?
I never really use pivot charts because they're not super dynamic like the charts or the data that you put in that pivot chart. You
Yeah.
can't really have formulas to dynamically change.
Okay.
So it's more of just building charts. Usually, within every workbook, there's always a tech tab. That if it's client facing, you'll probably hide that sheet just because it's a bunch of data.
Right.
But you'll put all that data in the tech tab, and then just kind of play with it from there.
Very cool. I mean, that's so cool because we were just talking off air that you're now building visualizations in Tableau, which
starting to.
Yeah.
Learning.
So Excel is kind of the natural evolution,
Mhm.
or Tableau is an evolution from Excel in terms of like building out that pivot chart functionality,
It
making it
is.
dynamic.
It is. It's more sophisticated in terms of their queries and their databases. Tableau is always going to be completely automated for the most part,
Right.
whereas Excel, if you're most of the time, the data that you're going to be putting in there is going to be some kind of export or something manual. So it's kind of interesting, the difference between Excel. It's an interesting transition going from Excel to Tableau, because in Excel, if you need the data, you just make it, and you create columns, you create a table, something where you can format the data how you want to. Whereas Tableau, it's a little bit different, and
It's,
maybe
it's, it's more rigid from a data structure
it
standpoint for
is. It
sure.
has to be a certain way. You can't really manipulate the data as easily as you can in Excel, but that could also be because I'm so new to Tableau.
Yeah. Well, two things. I think it will get easier, like as you get on. You may also Tableau is built on, I believe it's NoSQL, which is just a type of SQL.
Hmm.
So you may want to get deeper into SQL to understand kind of how all of that, which
Definitely.
SQL's just kind of like very similar to the formulas that you learn in Excel. I feel like a lot of people get hung up on, including myself. Like I kind of avoided SQL for years because it just seemed like, I don't know, super tedious, and
It seems like a
it's like
big mountain to climb, but then
right,
kind of once you start typing some things out, you realize how similar it is.
yeah. Well, okay, so it's funny because we're almost in an opposite track in terms of the relationship to Excel and Tableau. In
Hmm.
that, I ran my own agency for 8 years, working mainly with Power BI and Tableau. But now I've taken on a full time job and I'm working it in Excel. And
Hmm.
the thing that's frustrating to me is that they're like sometimes I make little mistakes
Hmm.
that I just would never make because of how rigid that structure is within Tableau or Power BI.
Right.
So, and you don't have to tell on yourself if you don't want to, but how accurate was your work? Or like, if you don't want to answer that question, what level of accuracy do they expect from people working in Excel?
That's a good question. I think there's, especially within Excel, there's always going to be something, just because of how Excel is built, especially when you start to get into the macros and stuff. One comma in the wrong place or something like that. It can tend to mess things up. So
Right.
I would say there is a kind of expectation and knowledge that Excel um, tends to be a little bit more fragile than Tableau.
Yeah. Well, the best thing about Excel is that, like you said earlier, you can completely customize it.
Correct.
The worst thing about Excel is that you can completely customize it because you might manually type in an O instead of a zero, and then
Right.
your whole formula is broken.
Right. There is. There's nobody's perfect. I've made plenty of mistakes and I'm going to in the future.
Yeah.
But the big thing is if you make a mistake, are you able to go back in there, know what you did, why you did it, and learn from it?
Yeah. So, and that's something that I guess I'm having to factor into my work more now that I'm in a different type of role, is the accuracy of it,
Hmm.
as opposed to where I was just kind of building out infrastructure before. It's like here's what your data is telling us. Now I kind of have to take more ownership of like what the data is. If it's wrong, going and investigating and figuring out what's going on specifically with it. Um, yeah, I guess it's just maybe a trade off or the difference between doing consulting work versus like being a full time analyst embedded within a company.
Hmm.
But okay, so you came to my class, found out about analytics, found an internship.
Hmm.
Then how did that internship go? Because that was kind of the first semester, the fall semester. Then over winter break, you came back. Then you started the internship, right?
Correct.
So feel free to tell us a little bit about that. Like what kind of work did you do? What were the challenges?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of, I think I had the internship for 3 months. So I got back in January, 3 to 4 months, maybe 5 months, something like that, because I know I started in January and worked through the summertime partially. Um, but the main task of the internship was supporting the APDs at Cogent. So the APDs that are people, that are talking to the clients. They're communicating what the tools do, why they do, how to use them, and training the clients how to use
Mm,
those tools.
gotcha. I was gonna say I like strategy more than I like being super in the weeds personally. But continue. So,
Yeah, so that was a big part of it. There were a couple renovations that they wanted made to the tool, some like new features added in. So I got to help out with those. The guy that I was working for under my internship, he was very good at Excel too, but the big thing was his capacity. Like he didn't have a lot of time to go in there
yeah.
and add some things into the tool. So I got to work pretty closely with him to um, make those additions and add that stuff in there. So that was a learning experience. There was a lot of stuff that I was really unfamiliar with. Like I really had no experience with macros before that. And the
You probably know more about macros than I do. 'Cause
I don't
I don't
know.
really I don't really write macros.
It's interesting. It's not technically coding. It's very close, and it's very similar to the like Excel formulas, but they do have their differences.
Okay, so what do you use macros for? My understanding of it, and it's probably not
Mhm.
100% accurate, is it mainly a formatting thing or is it
It can be. The big thing that macros are used for is automation.
okay.
There's a couple limitations within Excel that you just can't really make something without macros.
Mhm.
One of the big things that the tool used macros for was to automate like financial data history. So they'll fill out a month or a year or whatever time period worth of data.
Mhm.
They'll click save, and it goes into a database, and
Okay.
then it will refresh itself, clear itself. So in the next month or the next year, whatever, they can go in and refill that without having to like copy and paste the data somewhere,
Yeah.
and then we can build those charts off of that database that it gets copy and pasted into.
Okay, very cool. So it's I didn't realize that was a use case where it's like you can write a macro to help. Is it pushing it to a database or like a flat CSV file that's just huge?
No, it's pushing it into another Excel sheet.
Oh, okay.
So like there's usually like the tech tab, and then there's probably a data tab that are both hidden just to
What's tech tab? You said it a couple times. I'm not quite sure. I know what
it's
that is.
it's a very like
Is
it's
that
just
where you put like your scratch work?
yeah, basically
Okay.
where you're putting all the data tables, that kind of stuff, where not necessarily if it's a client facing tool that you want the clients to see, because it's just a bunch of numbers and stuff like that, but just a sheet where all the data is collected.
It's almost like you have your engine
Hmm.
and that's the tech tab, and then you close the hood, and
Right,
that's you hiding it in Excel.
right,
Yeah, because yeah, you don't want the clients necessarily to go and see the inner workings of it that are just kind of would be super confusing to them.
right. And yeah, it's not necessarily something that you need to see if you're super technically savvy. It's
Yeah,
interesting to look at, but otherwise, it's just a bunch of numbers on a white sheet.
I gotcha. So, what were the major lessons that you feel like you learned through that internship?
I think the biggest thing is just being open to learning. That was, just absorbing everything in that I could. If I had to give advice to anyone, it would kind of be to go out of your way, ask for work, ask for stuff to do, stuff to learn, to help
Hmm.
people out. If you're, at an internship, something like that, and you're kind of just sitting at your desk playing on your phone or something, um, you're not really getting a lot out of it. So I would say that was the biggest thing that kind of helped me, I guess, move forward into a full time position, was taking the initiative to build the tools, ask for work, seeing where I could fit in and help out.
Yeah, so it sounds like you took full advantage of the opportunity in front of you because you could have just kind of coasted through it and done the bare minimum, but another way of reframing up what an internship is, and granted, not all internships lead to jobs or
Mhm.
lead to a job opening,
Mhm.
but it's almost like an opportunity for you to have a 3 to 4 month interview where you get to learn a little bit about the company, you get to learn about how do I interface with this manager, would I want to work for this manager, what about the work, what about the technical skills, like it's a really kind of safe way to go about vetting from both sides if you think about it.
Mhm.
So it's like, what is Liam like? Because people can kind of lie in an interview or deceive,
Mhm.
or kind of come off in a way that maybe isn't true to who they are day to day. Um, Then also it's kind of safe for you because then you get to, instead of having, I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about, right? Like you have an interview with a company. I mean, sure, you can look them up, but it's like you have like 3 or 4 conversations with 1 or 2 people. I mean, that's kind of a gamble right there.
It is. Yeah. I wouldn't have. Very grateful for how my experience and having an internship kind of just getting a foot in the door, kind of, I would say,
Yeah.
easing your way into a full-time position. So I am grateful for that opportunity.
Well, then also too, you kind of start like a few months ahead of somebody else starting in an entry level role because you know people.
Right.
You've got access to the data, but you also understand the like what's our product placement in the market? Like who do we serve? What are the main benefits of that? What are the risks?
Mhm.
So you can kind of navigate a little bit more savvy than somebody just walking in fresh.
Right.
Okay, so how long was that internship? 3 months, 4 months?
3 to 4 months, maybe five. Started in January, and I believe I transitioned to full-time around maybe June,
Okay.
July.
So
So
what was the transition from internship to working full time? Was that
it was it
it
was a,
was it was significant, right? Because
it
it's
was
a lot more work than
it is. I was working about 20 hours
yeah.
a week as an intern and transferred to 40 hours. So it was a big flip. Um, I would say it was more of trying to think how to word this. It wasn't necessarily like a big flip. It was kind of just getting adjusted to being there from 8 till 5 and um,
So it was more of like an expansion
right.
than like a brand new novel thing.
Hmm.
So it's like, okay, it's just more of what I'm, which honestly, that sounds a lot less stressful than, you know, I feel like a lot of college students are going months now without landing a job. So like you graduate, then you apply, then you finally get an interview that leads to a job, and then you take that. It sounds like your your experience from school to full time work was like pretty seamless.
Yeah, yeah. I think I got lucky.
Yeah,
Definitely think so.
that's true because it can be tough. I mean, back when I was an undergrad, I went from getting a degree in economics to working full time in a commission sales role. So that was a super rough
I can
transition.
imagine.
Just well, being in a commission sales role just exposes you to so much rejection
Mhm.
that I feel like you just don't get typically. Like in school, you might like get some feedback on like a test or something or an essay, but it's not no 20 times a day, 5 days a week on and for months and years.
Right.
So, would you have any other thoughts on like that transition?
It wasn't necessarily, um, it was more of I went in the internship as a data analyst, and then my full time position now is a marketing KPI specialist.
Okay,
So I had taken a couple marketing classes like digital marketing. So it was interesting, kind of adjusting to a different environment. There was a lot of terminology, a lot of things that I had touched over in school, stuff like that. But when you're actually looking at like at real numbers and
right.
those kind of aspects, it's a little bit different than a digitally created environment in a class or something.
Yeah. Well, no, also it's so much more dynamic because like getting a textbook that's marketing 101, there's
Hmm.
the 5 Ps or whatever, or digital, print, email, like focusing specifically on one organization or, one vertical within that. Like there's so much complexity within that.
There is. There's so much data to back it up too that you can look into. And the thing about the marketing classes is that you do an ad campaign or something like that, and you have to do this keyword at a certain price, or else it's not going to do very good. And that's not really how it works. Marketing is always evolving. There's always
Hmm.
environmental, political things that affect marketing, and it's constantly changing. There's not typically like a right or wrong answer. Like I said before, it's there's 2 or 3 different ways to solve a problem, and they're all right.
Yeah. It seems like a theme that we kind of keep coming back to is it's almost like being a lawyer. Like you need to just come up with a good justification for what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And and this seems like a pretty big difference between being in school versus being on the job. In school, it's almost like the teacher sits standing in the front, and you're sitting down, and you need to kind of make the right answer. Versus like I'm not sure if this is how it works with your manager, but with my manager, he'll be like, "Hey, we've got this problem," and then that's pretty much it. I've got to go and solve and like fill in the gaps. Sometimes I even have to like interpret what he's saying.
Hmm.
Um, and then there's a trade off there of like, okay, I can ask for clarifying questions, but if I ask for too many, then he starts to get frustrated. But if I don't ask for enough, then it's like, why didn't you ask for more clarifying question? There seems to be a lot more. It's just more nebulous working on the job.
Hmm. It is, yeah. It's it's not black and white. It's not
Mhm.
like there's a go do this way, and it's like you were saying. There's a problem. Um, my managers, and they do a really good job of kind of explaining what the problem is, and then this is what I think is causing the problem, and this is how I think it could be fixed. But I need you to go and figure it out. So um, you're completely right when you're in the aspect of it's not necessarily a right or wrong. It's just go figure it out.
Actually, this might be an interesting question. So, what are the differences, or what is your difference between how you relate to professors or teachers and managers?
Mm.
Because they're both kind of similar, right? Like they're both somewhat of an authority figure in your life.
Hmm.
I mean, the manager is definitely more serious because it's like, all right, I've got bills to pay, money coming in. But I mean, still, a professor can fail you if like you didn't you didn't show up, you know?
Hmm. At least in my experience, with the professors, it's kind of like read this so you can learn that and get a good grade on this test. Whereas, with my managers, it's kind of, hey, let's brainstorm this together. Let's work together and try to figure this out.
Okay, so it feels much more collaborative.
It does.
Okay, that's cool because I feel like a lot of that is not the typical experience for a lot of people getting their first job. They feel like they're more so like just an order taker. Like
Mhm.
there's, hey, we have this, give me this, give me this, give me this. So that's awesome. It sounds like you've kind of found yourself in a really like it seems like your thoughts and your opinions are heard and
They are, yeah.
validated.
It's a very positive and encouraging work environment.
That's great. So have you have any thoughts on like what's next? Like, are you wanting to go more down the marketing space, or you wanting to go more technical and like learn Python or dig into AI or any kind of stuff like that?
I'm not super sure. I'm kind of just, I've been this way my whole entire life. It's kind of just go with the flow
Yeah,
and see where I end up. I find I'm very grateful because I kind of have the opportunity to work in marketing, but then I also do a lot of work outside of marketing for more of the like internal consulting side. So I kind of get a taste of a little bit of
that's great.
of everything that coaching has to offer. And I was actually talking to someone about this the other day, but they all kind of supplement each other. Like on the internal side, you're building tools, helping create stuff that maybe tracks internal employee production, something like that. And there's not a whole lot of client facing conversations and stuff like that. Whereas my position in the marketing department, I do get to, hop on meetings and have KPI reviews with clients. So I think that is I think that was very important to me, at least, because that was one of my struggle points coming out of college. Was, I learned a lot of stuff, but when you're sitting talking to a CFO of a company, it's like how well can you communicate the data that you've collected for them.
So is that where do you want to spend more energy that way, or was that more of a, I feel like this is a weakness of mine that I wanted to overcome?
It was.
Are you enjoying that though?
I am. Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of view it as a challenge, and I'm trying to, get better at it every time that I'm on a call with a client. But it was definitely I don't want to say fear, but it's kind of like a mental block almost.
Well, public speaking is,
It's not easy.
no, it's, I remember when I first started teaching, it was, well, it was in the middle of COVID too.
Yeah.
So like I was wearing a mask, which I'd never really had to do before. Like,
Yeah.
so that, yeah, it was kind of a double whammy there, but
Yeah.
um, that's cool. So it sounds like the kind of the key thing that you want to get is communication and maybe influence.
Yeah. Communication, influence, and just being able to there's a difference between communicating and effectively communicating. Like, you don't want to sit there and talk to a business owner that has 25 other things on his head and just keep blabbering to him. You want to tell him what he needs to know, and tell him in a way that he can make decisions and then
Right.
save his time.
Well, it kind of makes me
His or
think
her.
of, it kind of makes me think of like, Tableau or Power BI. Like, have you ever done a level of detail calculation?
Don't know if
So,
I've ran into that.
so it's a little bit of a complex topic, but it's like you can write an LOD calculation, and if you're pulling, location, you can set it to be at state, or you can set it to be at zip code, or region or whatever, and it lets you kind of dictate what level of granularity. So like when you're talking to the CFO, you don't want all of the
Mhm.
weeds. It's just like roll this up into kind of what is the main thing that I need to get out of this.
The so what factor.
Yeah, well,
Like, what does this mean to me?
it's almost like kindergarten math. It's like, this square is bigger than this square, so you should do this decision, which is so funny. But because I don't know, I've had this conversation before, and some people are like, well, that kind of makes like the executive sound stupid, and it's not even that they're stupid, it's that they have so much going on that they
Yeah.
run from like 30-minute meeting to 15-minute meeting to, so you've got to get like,
Right.
you've got to prioritize like, what am I communicating here?
Right.
If you're talking to someone else on your team, yeah, you can go super into the weeds, and like, yeah, actually that's what you should do. You
Mhm.
should kind of figure out, okay, well, here's the problem, and then go and figure that out. If you're talking to your manager, you could still get into the weeds in some situations, but not all of them.
That's what I was about to say. And there are some business owners they still like to, even with all the daily tasks and struggles that they go through, they still like to see the granular detail.
Yeah,
So I think it's the conversation I was having the other day is, show them what they need to see first, and then if they need more information, you can always dive into that
right.
afterwards. But if you bore them with the small things before you get to the big factors, they might miss the big message that you're trying to communicate to them.
Yeah, you don't want them to tune out.
Right.
So good. That's fantastic. I feel like working on communication is going to be huge for you.
It is.
I feel like the technical side, I feel like that's going to come somewhat natural to you.
It is. It's always a learning process. I mean, the more time that you spend
Yeah.
on something, and there's always going to be something that you run into. Even the other day, I ran into an issue, and I had absolutely no idea how to figure it out. Took a little break, came back to it, and I was able to solve it. So it's kind of just mess around with it and find out. There's
Yeah.
another term for that, but
um, are you using AI at all?
not really.
Okay.
There's a couple times with formulas, or maybe just more of a spell check. Um, but I try to stay away from AI as much as I can.
Really? Why?
Just because it's
You scared of
I
it?
I don't know. Um, at least with my experience, there's been a lot of inaccuracies with AI.
Yeah. Well,
Maybe some of the more advanced AIs are a little bit different, but if the AI that I've kind of used more often than not is ChatGPT, and that there's a lot of inaccuracies
yeah.
and errors within the stuff it spits out.
Well, one thing that I'm starting to get deeper into is working with databases and specifically Alteryx. Have you heard of
I
Alteryx?
have not.
So it's an ETL tool. So it allows you to connect to multiple data sources, manipulate the data, create
Okay.
calculations, but there's a ton within that suite.
Hmm.
It's kind of like the transform data button or Power Query Editor within Power BI. It's like that, but I would say it's more expansive because I mean, that's the main focus of the tool.
Hmm.
Um, but one thing that has been interesting is there's like an internal meetup group at the company I'm working at, and literally on Wednesday of this week, the guy who's been working with Alteryx for like 15, 20 years, like walked through a whole use case where he used specifically, isn't there an AI with X, Twitter, that they're using? And he wrote out like 20 lines of code using the AI prompt
Hmm.
and then optimized it. And yeah, there were a few little tweaks that he had to make to it, but I'm starting to see like this AI stuff can be
It is. It's super.
transformational.
It is, and it's super helpful. And if you use it like very loosely, like,
Yeah.
hey, I got this issue. Maybe it's a formula or a line of code that you were talking about. If you just use it loosely, like, I got this issue. What are a couple different ways I could solve it? You could take the overall message that it spits out and kind of type your own code or formula in with that. But it definitely kind of helps you open your mind to a couple different
Right.
ways to solve an issue that may be more effective.
Well, it's so fast, and
It is.
I think what it does a really good job with are like closed systems. So
Mhm.
like SQL,
Yep.
I mean, I believe that's a closed system where it's got all the logic laid out within it. There's,
Like very
reference
specific
manuals. Yeah.
parameters. Yep.
So it can go through documentation and like and figure things out.
Right.
Um, that's cool. So any other closing thoughts? So we've met what?
We've met a couple times.
Well, no, I'm saying when did we meet? Like a year and a
When
half
we
ago?
first met, I think it's close to a year and a half ago.
Yeah. Well, Liam, you've come a super far way
I
since like
appreciate
the shy kid
it.
who showed up in my class.
Still working on it.
Yeah, I mean you're shy, but like you know what I think it is. I think you're a lot more confident now.
I think so.
Like, where do you think that confidence came from?
Really, I think it was, you know, with the internship and um, transferring to full time, just being able to be around a lot of intelligent people,
Yeah,
and
and like
everyone
holding your own.
holding your own,
Yeah,
and realizing that there's a human factor. Everyone makes mistakes. You're
yeah,
gonna make mistakes. You can't avoid it. But it's how you handle those mistakes and how you handle yourself within those time periods where you made a error or something like that. Do you kind of sit down, sulk about it, or do you pick yourself up and keep moving forward? So that was a really helpful factor. Is just seeing other people, have their human mistakes along with me.
your voice keeps cracking, dude. I'm sorry.
You're fine.
All right, that's it, folks. Wubba lubba dub dub. No, I'm kidding. All right, Liam, thank you so much for coming on. Let's kind of close this out. We met, I think, roughly what, a year and a half ago.
Close to a year and a half ago.
Um, and I just got to say, like, you've come a super far away from like the shy, timid kid who walked into my classroom.
Thank you.
What do you think has kind of like brought you out of your shell?
I think being around other intelligent people and getting to work closely with them and learn from them has helped. But also, being able to see the human factor that everybody makes mistakes, and it's just about how you handle those mistakes and how you handle yourself within those time periods.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I feel like you're just so much more confident than you were.
Mhm.
And I guess the way you build confidence is through demonstrated performance, right?
It is, yeah, and it's completely, how you handle yourself. If you know what you're talking about and you sit back in a corner and mumble it or something, um, people are less likely to
Well,
listen.
it's not convincing.
It's not
You're not
convincing. You
saying
don't
it from
sound
like,
like
I
you.
don't believe this.
Right,
It's like
right.
very, very timid.
Yep.
And
And
well,
I was reading a book the other day, and it was saying, within communication, I think it's around 80% of tone and body language,
right.
and 20% the message that you're trying to relay.
Yeah. Well, Liam, I got to say, I'm proud of you. You've come a super far way. And it sounds
Thank
like
you.
you're killing this job.
I appreciate all the time and effort that you spent in those classes with the Power BI and Tableau, and setting up those real world projects that we worked on.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
All right, that's a little bit better than Wubba Lubba Dub Dub.